These are real 911 calls, disturbing, mysterious, and true. Each story will send chills down your spine and slowly drift you into sleep. This story is completely free. We don't put any ads, which means we don't earn anything from these videos. All we ask is one small favor. Please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. It's free for you, but it gives us the motivation to keep making more real police stories every night. Also, tell us in the comments which city are you watching from and what time is it right now. We love reading your messages. Now, let's begin the story. Story number 1. I was 3 years into the job with the county sheriff's office when the 911 hang-ups started coming in from the Wycliffe address. It was one of those properties everybody knows without meaning, to the big farmhouse just outside town, the one with the long tree tunnel and the mailbox leaning like a tired shoulder. Foreclosure. Years empty. Kids dared each other to knock on it. Adults drove past a little faster than they needed to at night. The first time, it was a simple hang-up. Dispatch called back, no answer, so they sent me. No lights on the property, no power meter on the panel, just a house the color of old bone with windows that reflected your cruiser lights and made them look like something moving inside. I did the walk around, checking for a forced entry, listening. It was a still night. You could hear your own clothes brush against you. The wind made a small whisper in the cottonwoods, and somewhere further off a dog barked 3 times and then gave up. Nothing. Second time, same thing. 911 hang-up. No answer on callback. Different shift. Same address. This time, I had a trainee riding with me. He was new and trying to pretend he wasn't spooked. Could be a line fault, he said, because that's what you say when you're 30 minutes into a slow night and don't want to admit the hair on your arms is paying attention to a dead house. We did another perimeter. Same nothing. No footprints in the blown dust on the back step. No signs of wildlife. The trainee knocked at the kitchen door, thump, 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 and the sound died like it got swallowed by insulation. The third call is where I mark the beginning of what I'm about to tell you. It was about 2:30 in the morning. The graveyard hours always feel like the air's a little thicker and time takes longer to move. Dispatch came over the air calm as ever. Unit 3 to 12, 911 hang-up from 421 Wycliffe Road. Callback attempted. Got a child's voice. No further. I keyed up. 3 hasta 12 en route. A child's voice. That changes your posture. You go from slow to ready. I rolled quiet, no lights, and parked just out of sight of the gate. The gravel on Wycliffe is packed hard, and the only sound when I wiped my palms on my trousers was the soft rasp of nylon. I told dispatch I was on scene, stood in the headlights for a moment to make my shadow long on the drive, then shut them off. A spill of moonlight made the ruts look like shallow streams. Dispatch, can you attempt callback while I'm on the porch? I asked. Affirmative, they said. And you can always hear the operator lean forward a little when there's a kid in the mix, even if their voice doesn't change. I walked up the porch steps with the careful wait you learn, heel to toe so the boards don't shout. The front door was old oak, crazed a bit near the bottom, with a beveled glass pane that showed me, warped. There was a doorbell that looked original to the house, a porcelain button the size of a nickel. I didn't touch it. Sheriff's office, I announced softly. We got a call from this number. If someone's here and needs help, say something. I put my ear close to the glass. The house had that quiet you can feel in your teeth, far away inside. A radiator ticked in a way no radiator should without heat running. Then from upstairs, faint as a memory, I heard a phone ring. Not a modern ring. The bell kind. The double pulse with a breath in the middle. The kind that snaps you back to the 90s. It rang twice and stopped. Dispatch, I said into my shoulder mic. Did you call back? There was a beat. Negative, they replied. We held waiting on your go-ahead. I slid my eyes to the upstairs windows. Dark. My hand pressed against the pane and came back dusty. I asked for another unit, because it's policy, and because I wanted another set of footsteps on the wood to anchor mine. While I waited, I checked the back. The kitchen door had a glass insert that showed me counters under a film of gray and a refrigerator unplugged and open. On the table was a ring where a plant used to sit and a little circle where a salt shaker would have left. Everything in that kitchen was a paused sentence. Deputy Morales rolled up quiet. She's one of those people who only moves as much as necessary. We met eyes, nodded. "You hear the ring?" I asked. "I was still on the road," she said. "You got anything?" "Not yet. Here's the part where someone reading this might want us to kick the door, but forced entry isn't step one unless life's in danger. Still, we had that child's voice from the callback attempt, and we had a ring we both would write down later. We can try the back," I said. The knob turned to a stop. When I pulled, something on the other side a drawer left open. A chair dragged and let the door move half an inch, enough to get fingers into the gap. I set my shoulder. The wood gave with a tired sound. "Sheriff's office," I called again, louder. "Make yourself known." My voice went into the house and got smaller. We stepped in. If you've ever gone into a place that's been closed up for a long time, you know the smell. Dry paper, old wood, dust. The kind of smell that makes you think of slow time. Our beams cut through it. The kitchen table had a film that our lights made glitter. The wall phone, the kind with the cradle and a coiled cord, was there, mounted next to a list of numbers in blue ballpoint. Under emergency, someone had written 911 incompletely, like they'd gotten distracted on the last one. The phone's cord was unplugged from the wall. Or rather, the socket itself had the wires cut and taped. No dial tone. No line. I looked at Morales. She lifted her brows. We both heard the same thing again. Upstairs. That double pulse ring. 2 notes. A breath. 2 notes. It crept down the staircase like it took the steps one at a time. "Dispatch," I said quietly. "Any units on scene calling in? Any phone company folks out?" "Negative," came the answer. "Do you require additional units?" "Stand by," I said. We cleared the lower floor deliberately. Living room with books on a shelf that had settled into tiny curves. A doorway with glass. A sitting room with a piano nobody had polished in years. Family photos still on the walls in that particular way that reminded you this had been someone's home until one day it wasn't. On the stairs, each step wore a lace of dust, and our prints made new islands in it. Halfway up, the sound came again. The phone. It wasn't loud. It was more like the house was whispering the idea of a ring. At the landing, there was a narrow hallway with 3 doors. The first opened to a room with floral wallpaper lifting at the seams and a child's bed with a metal frame. On the wall above the bed, this I remember with an unreasonable clarity, there was a hand-painted height chart with the top ends of names rubbed away. The second room was bare, except for a dresser. The third, at the end, had a small desk, a chair, and on the wall next to the door another phone, rotary this time, maybe original. Its receiver hung a fraction off its cradle, as if placed gently and badly. We both stopped. The ring didn't come from that phone. It came from somewhere further, softer, like through a wall. "Hello?" Morales called. "This is the sheriff's office." She had one of those voices kids like, even when she's telling them to knock it off. The house answered by staying exactly itself. We went to the phone on the wall. I touched the receiver with a gloved finger and set it fully in place. As I did, the whole thing trembled, not a big movement, just the way a thing does when something is happening somewhere else in its circuit. But there was no circuit. The wires that should have fed that phone were capped, tidy electrical tape wrapped like a ribbon. "Possible battery?" Morales said. "In a phone like this?" I asked. And we both knew the answer. I lifted the receiver and pressed it to my ear because sometimes you do the dumb thing to prove to your nerves that nothing is happening. No dial tone, only a faint, like the ocean was 1,000 miles off and someone had opened a door to it. "Dispatch," I said, keeping my voice level. "Any callback audio recorded?" "Affirmative," the operator said after a second. Open line with faint speaking. Couldn't make out words. Sounded like maybe a child. The line went dead on its own. "Can you play it down the line?" I asked. There was a pause, then a couple of crackles as they patched it. The radio is not a device for spooky moments, but the human ear will make what it needs to out of static. And then, on the air, quiet but clear, we heard my own voice say, "Sheriff's office, make yourself known." It was my tone from 20 minutes earlier in the kitchen downstairs, the shape of my vowels. And under it, small like a floorboard settling, a second voice that was not mine and not Morales's, A soft, hello, the kind that makes you picture a hand a child hasn't grown into yet moving toward a phone bigger than their head. I felt the scalp pull at the back of my neck in that way that doesn't care how many times you've been told not to feed your imagination. Morales' eyes moved to me. She tried to roll her shoulders like she always does when there's tension. Copy, I said to dispatch, because that's all you can say on the radio when your mouth wants to say something else. We finished clearing the upstairs. The closets were closets. The bathroom mirror had a perfect circle wiped in. Story number 1. I was 3 years into the job with the county sheriff's office when the 911 hang-ups started coming in from the Wycliffe address. It was one of those properties everybody knows without meaning to the big farmhouse just outside town, the one with the long tree tunnel and the mailbox leaning like a tired shoulder. Foreclosure. Years empty. Kids dared each other to knock on it. Adults drove past a little faster than they needed to at night. The first time, it was a simple hang-up. Dispatch called back, no answer, so they sent me. No lights on the property, no power meter on the panel, just a house the color of old bone with windows that reflected your cruiser lights and made them look like something moving inside. I did the walk-around, checking for a forced entry, listening. It was a still night. You could hear your own clothes brush against you. The wind made a small whisper in the cottonwoods, and somewhere further off a dog barked 3 times and then gave up. Nothing. Second time, same thing. 911 hang-up. No answer on callback. Different shift. Same address. This time, I had a trainee riding with me. He was new and trying to pretend he wasn't spooked. Could be a line fault, he said, because that's what you say when you're 30 minutes into a slow night and don't want to admit the hair on your arms is paying attention to a dead house. We did another perimeter. Same nothing. No footprints in the blown dust on the back step. No signs of wildlife. The trainee knocked at the kitchen door, thump, 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 and the sound died like it got swallowed by insulation. The third call is where I mark the beginning of what I'm about to tell you. It was about 2:30 in the morning. The graveyard hours always feel like the air's a little thicker and time takes longer to move. Dispatch came over the air calm as ever. Unit 3 to 12, 911 hang-up from 421 Wycliffe Road. Callback attempted. Got a child's voice. No further. I keyed up. 3 hasta 12 en route. A child's voice. That changes your posture. You go from slow to ready. I rolled quiet, no lights, and parked just out of sight of the gate. The gravel on Wycliffe is packed hard, and the only sound when I wiped my palms on my trousers was the soft rasp of nylon. I told dispatch I was on scene, stood in the headlights for a moment to make my shadow long on the drive, then shut them off. A spill of moonlight made the ruts look like shallow streams. Dispatch, can you attempt callback while I'm on the porch? I asked. Affirmative, they said. And you can always hear the operator lean forward a little when there's a kid in the mix, even if their voice doesn't change. I walked up the porch steps with the careful wait you learn, heel to toe so the boards don't shout. The front door was old oak, crazed a bit near the bottom, with a beveled glass pane that showed me, warped. There was a doorbell that looked original to the house, a porcelain button the size of a nickel. I didn't touch it. Sheriff's office, I announced softly. We got a call from this number. If someone's here and needs help, say something. I put my ear close to the glass. The house had that quiet you can feel in your teeth, far away inside. A radiator ticked in a way no radiator should without heat running. Then from upstairs, faint as a memory, I heard a phone ring. Not a modern ring. The bell kind. The double pulse with a breath in the middle. The kind that snaps you back to the 90s. It rang twice and stopped. Dispatch, I said into my shoulder mic. Did you call back? There was a beat. Negative, they replied. We held waiting on your go-ahead. I slid my eyes to the upstairs windows. Dark. My hand pressed against the pane and came back dusty. I asked for another unit, because it's policy, and because I wanted another set of footsteps on the wood to anchor mine. While I waited, I checked the back. The kitchen door had a glass insert that showed me counters under a film of gray and a refrigerator unplugged and open. On the table was a ring where a plant used to sit and a little circle where a salt shaker would have left. Everything in that kitchen was a paused sentence. Deputy Morales rolled up quiet. She's one of those people who only moves as much as necessary. We met eyes, nodded. You hear the ring? I asked. I was still on the road, she said. You got anything? Not yet. Here's the part where someone reading this might want us to kick the door, but forced entry isn't step one unless life's in danger. Still, we had that child's voice from the callback attempt, and we had a ring we both would write down later. We can try the back, I said. The knob turned to a stop. When I pulled, something on the other side a drawer left open. A chair dragged and let the door move half an inch, enough to get fingers into the gap. I set my shoulder. The wood gave with a tired sound. Sheriff's office, I called again louder. Make yourself known. My voice went into the house and got smaller. We stepped in. If you've ever gone into a place that's been closed up for a long time, you know the smell. Dry paper, old wood, dust. The kind of smell that makes you think of slow time. Our beams cut through it. The kitchen table had a film that our lights made glitter. The wall phone, the kind with the cradle and a coiled cord, was there, mounted next to a list of numbers in blue ballpoint. Under emergency, someone had written 911 incompletely, like they'd gotten distracted on the last one. The phone's cord was unplugged from the wall. Or rather, the socket itself had the wires cut and taped. No dial tone. No line. I looked at Morales. She lifted her brows. We both heard the same thing again. Upstairs. That double pulse ring. 2 notes. A breath. 2 notes. It crept down the staircase like it took the steps one at a time. Dispatch, I said quietly. Any units on scene calling in? Any phone company folks out? Negative, came the answer. Do you require additional units? Stand by, I said. We cleared the lower floor deliberately. Living room with books on a shelf that had settled into tiny curves. A doorway with glass. A sitting room with a piano nobody had polished in years. Family photos still on the walls in that particular way that reminded you this had been someone's home until one day it wasn't. On the stairs, each step wore a lace of dust, and our prints made new islands in it. Halfway up, the sound came again. The phone. It wasn't loud. It was more like the house was whispering the idea of a ring. At the landing, there was a narrow hallway with 3 doors. The first opened to a room with floral wallpaper lifting at the seams and a child's bed with a metal frame. On the wall above the bed, this I remember with an unreasonable clarity, there was a hand-painted height chart with the top ends of names rubbed away. The second room was bare, except for a dresser. The third, at the end, had a small desk, a chair, and on the wall next to the door another phone, rotary this time, maybe original. Its receiver hung a fraction off its cradle, as if placed gently and badly. We both stopped. The ring didn't come from that phone. It came from somewhere further, softer, like through a wall. Hello? Morales called. This is the sheriff's office. She had one of those voices kids like, even when she's telling them to knock it off. The house answered by staying exactly itself. We went to the phone on the wall. I touched the receiver with a gloved finger and set it fully in place. As I did, the whole thing trembled, not a big movement, just the way a thing does when something is happening somewhere else in its circuit. But there was no circuit. The wires that should have fed that phone were capped, tidy electrical tape wrapped like a ribbon. Possible battery? Morales said. In a phone like this? I asked. And we both knew the answer. I lifted the receiver and pressed it to my ear because sometimes you do the dumb thing to prove to your nerves that nothing is happening. No dial tone, only a faint, like the ocean was 1,000 miles off and someone had opened a door to it. Dispatch, I said, keeping my voice level. Any callback audio recorded? Affirmative, the operator said after a second. Open line with faint speaking. Couldn't make out words. Sounded like maybe a child. The line went dead on its own. Can you play it down the line? I asked. There was a pause, then a couple of crackles as they patched it. The radio is not a device for spooky moments, but the human ear will make what it needs to out of static. And then, on the air, quiet but clear, we heard my own voice say, Sheriff's office, make yourself known. It was my tone from 20 minutes earlier in the kitchen downstairs, the shape of my vowels. And under it, small like a floorboard settling, a second voice that was not mine and not Morales's, a soft hello. The kind that makes you picture a hand a child hasn't grown into yet moving toward a phone bigger than their head. I felt the scalp pull at the back of my neck in that way that doesn't care how many times you've been told not to feed your imagination. Morales' eyes moved to me. She tried to roll her shoulders like she always does when there's tension. "Copy," I said to dispatch, because that's all you can say on the radio when your mouth wants to say something else. We finished clearing the upstairs. The closets were closets. The bathroom mirror had a perfect circle wiped in, thinking the same thing I was. If this was where the calls came from, how? "Control," I said into my shoulder radio. "We're at Street Anselm's West Wing, Nurse Station 3C. The extension here shows 3401. The line appears isolated. Any recent activity?" "Affirmative," Control replied. "We received another open line as you were in the lift. Line stayed up for 28 seconds. Call handler reports hearing a door close and footsteps. We have the recording if you need." "We'll have a listen later," I said. "Any more detail on the voice?" "Female, late teens or adult, hard to place." We started a slow clear. The corridor branched, and every patient door had a small window and a little light above it. Most doors stood ajar, taped with notes from months before, "Sink isolated," "Blinds to be removed," that kind of thing. Our torches cut neat cones through the half-light. In the first room off the station, the blinds were open to the night, giving us a view of scaffolding and the glow of sodium streetlight beyond. The bed space was empty. There was a plastic chair with a faint scuff on it, as if someone had used it as a step not long ago. The windows were shut, the handles under those little clear cases that stop patients opening them wide. I put the back of my hand to the glass. Cold, as expected. In the next room, we found a wall-mounted alarm panel for the nurse call system. The little lamp on it, the one that would flash if someone pressed a bedside call button, was off. In the quiet, I could almost convince myself I heard a distant chime, like a call light would make. The thing about a hospital after hours is that your brain supplies normal noises from other places. A trolley in use 2 floors down becomes a creak in the wing you're in. We kept our pace steady, methodical, doors left open behind us so we could see our way back. At the end of the corridor, a double fire door had been propped open with a rubber wedge. The wedge had a painty streak on it, bright white, like it had been used by builders during the day. I looked at Avery. She looked at me. Little things like that tell you who's been using a place and when. We went through. "Control," Avery said. "We're proceeding into the annex rooms beyond 3C. Any further noise on the line?" "Stand by," Control said. There was a pause that felt longer than it probably was. Then, "We've received a fresh open line ping. This one shows as an unallocated extension on the same block. Patching you a clip." They aired a short burst into our radios, unusual, but you can do it. On the clip we heard, again, the quiet of a corridor. But beneath that, very faint, the click of our own radios, or ones like them. The same little double beep you get when you key up, but delayed. Then a voice, low and clear, mine. "Control, we're at Street Anselm's West Wing." And underneath, almost tucked into the seam of the sound, a woman saying, "Can you help me?" Exact cadence, like the one we'd heard from security's PC. Hearing your own voice in a place and time that doesn't line up tends to pull your stomach a bit. Avery made a small sound that meant the same thing my scalp did. We kept going. Past the annex, there was a little day room, plastic chairs stacked in the corner. A notice board with tattered edges of 4 sheets under drawing pins. A shelf with a ceramic bird the color of tea sitting by the window, as if someone left it there to watch. The clock above the door had stopped, hands at 1:14. In the half-light, the minute hand looked just a shade darker than the hour, so you felt like it might move if you watched long enough. From somewhere above us came a soft, almost polite rattle, like a door handle being tried. We froze, listened. Nothing after. Old building, wind and scaffolding. Probably nothing. Probably. We reached a small treatment room with a red phone on the wall by the door. It was the kind used to reach switchboard in an emergency, heavy handset, label about keeping the line clear. Its cord had been clipped and taped. Avery touched the tape with a gloved finger. It had a smear of dust over it, undisturbed. She raised a brow. I shrugged. We're not electricians. We log what we see. On the way back, something small and ordinary made me stop. The rubber wedge we'd seen keeping the fire doors open was no longer where it had been. The doors stood shut, magnets holding, and the wedge sat on the far side of the doors, neat as if someone had set it there tidy. "Did you move that?" I asked. "No," Avery said, just as flat. She stepped forward, pushed the bar, and the doors opened smoothly. No resistance. No one hiding behind them. The wedge was right where you'd put it if you'd been clearing and needed them shut again. Steve was still at the main threshold, visible down the long run of light and shadow, his silhouette patient. We went back to the desk. I lifted the 3,401 handset again, not sure what result I expected. The nothing was the same. To my left, a little light on a desk monitor, not the screen, but the power board flickered once and died. No reason, just that. Control called back in. "Update for you. Estates at the hospital says that Level 3 West has had its power reduced to emergency only. Phones should be offline. They're on the way to meet you." "Received," I said. "We'll hold here." We stood a bit, just letting the building be itself around us. It's a trick you learn. You don't push all the time. You let the space speak. The only sounds were the quiet hum of whatever emergency circuits kept those nightlights on. And now and then, a soft settling sound from the scaffolding. My eye went to the whiteboard again. Someone had written, in the faint, dry ghost of a marker pen wiped away, "Mon. 2. Wet across the top and little names down the side. Under 2, the faintest shadow of a tick mark. Like that day had once had something planned. We were on a Tuesday. "Control," Avery said softly. "Do me a favor. Call this extension 3401 from your end. Just humor me." We both watched the dead phone, not expecting anything. It didn't ring, but from down the corridor, somewhere between the nurse's bay and the day room, we heard, unmistakably, a phone ring. Not loud. Not from any phone we'd just looked at. Just a clean, business-like ring, short, once. It sounded too centered to be coming from outside the wing, and too present to be from another floor. We looked at each other. I didn't say, "Did you hear that?" Because we both did. We walked toward where the sound had been. Halfway down, a tiny red LED on the nurse call panel over one of the doors blinked once and went dark. It wasn't the steady flash you get when someone presses the bedside button. It was one blink, a single patient's room acknowledging a call, and then thinking better of it. We stepped in. Empty room. Bed in the corner. Folded up. Mattress gone. On the bed frame, a paper tag with a barcode half peeled. On the sill, a scrap of blue paper from a disposable glove. Nothing else. And yet the space held a kind of held breath. Estates arrived then, a man in orange with a beard and a badge on a lanyard, huffing like he'd done 3 flights in a long corridor. He unlocked an access panel and showed us the line isolator for that part of the building. "See? Off," he said, showing the dead lights. "We chop power at the riser for safety when we close a ward. Phones are on an old PBX. We've taken the cards out for this block." He gave me that look people give the police when they don't want you to think they're daft. "We've been getting ghost calls from the old system, if I'm honest," he said. "Not just tonight. Week before last, we had a call to switchboard from a lift car not here anymore. Some electrician I am, telling you this. But old copper can hold noise, and the PBX is temperamental. We've told them it needs fully ripping out." "Did you hear that ring just now?" Avery asked. He hesitated then. "I did," he said quietly. "I was hoping you hadn't." We cleared the rest with him so we could say we'd been thorough. Back at the desk, I made my update. "Control. Street Anselm's West Wing, Level 3. No persons found. No signs of forced entry or tampering. Unexplained ring heard. Estates confirm lines isolated. Security to monitor. We'll head back to you for the audio." Control said they'd tag the CAD and hold the recordings for our report. As we rode the lift back down ourselves, Saint and the estatesman Avery turned to me with that small grin she uses to make a thing ordinary. "You going to put the wedge moving itself in the log?" she asked. "I'll write wedge repositioned," I said. "That's what it did. We went to the little office off control when we got back to the station. The clip they had cued was the one they'd patched on the air, extended. We listened to it on decent headphones. You can hear more that way. You could clearly hear my radio hiss as I keyed up to say we were on scene. You could hear a breathing pattern ours, the slow, measured kind you get when you're walking and being quiet. Then, after a stretch of that room tone, a woman again, a little closer to the mic now. "Can you help me?" Same words as the first clip, same rise at the end, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to ask. Then something I hadn't noticed before. A door gently shutting, the sound you get when someone holds the handle and lets it go carefully so it doesn't bang. At that point in time, all the doors we touched we had let go of gently. That's the job. But for a line to pick that up, a phone had to be open to it. There wasn't a live phone in that wing. Metadata shows the call hit the 999 system from a private branch switch at Street Anselm's. Controls tech said, spinning in his chair to face us. It presented as extension 3401, but the PBX vendor we spoke to said that extension's card was pulled months ago. They mentioned something about line capacitance, interference. It's rare, but ghost digits can show as an extension. I'll be honest, this one's doing my head in. Phones are not my thing. We wrote our report. Security's log, our observations. The audio attached. These things don't go anywhere dramatic 99 times in 100. You tick the boxes, you leave something polite and true on the page, and you go to the next call. 2 nights later, at nearly the same time, Control sent out another silent 999 from Street Anselm's West Wing. Different call handler. Same tone in their voice when they told me the details. This time, Avery and I were tied up on a road traffic collision and couldn't attend. Another unit went. They did their walk. They heard nothing. Estates reported no alarms triggered, no signs of anyone on CCTV in that corridor. We closed that CAD too. Weeks passed. The West Wing scaffold came down in stages. They gutted level 3. New wiring went in, fresh paint. New phones. One afternoon, I was passing for a statement and saw workers carrying out stacks of old phone hardware on trolleys, coiled cords, and PBX cards in plastic tubs. The new person at security waved. "They've pulled the lot," he said. "Whole old system out. Had a bloke in here swear those old boards could start a call with nothing connected if a bus sneezed 3 floors away." He laughed in a way that said he didn't quite believe his own joke. A month after that, we had a call from Street Anselm's again. Same wing, now shining. This time it was a real patient, a fall. We rode up in the modern lift that didn't play music and opened into a corridor that looked like a different building. Bright, clean, busy nurses. 3C's desk had people at it with lanyards and screens. I asked one of them casually where they'd put the old phones. "E-waste," she said. "All gone. Good riddance." The old ones used to ring out of sequence. Scared me on nights. We did our job. Shook a hand. Left. After all of it, I still sometimes hear that small, unembarrassed, "Can you help me?" in my head, not afraid, just asking. There are explanations, sensible ones, and I've seen a lot of them turn out to be true. Lines can do odd things when water gets where it shouldn't. Old PBX systems do misbehave. Buildings hold noise. We investigate people, not premises. That night, we found no one who needed us, no one to charge, nothing broken. Still, every time I pull up to a closed door now, even a good new one, I notice whether the wedge is where we left it. And when Control says, "Silent 999, I hear the soft ring of a phone from a corridor where nothing is plugged in. And I say, "We'll take it." Story number 3. I've worn an RCMP badge on Vancouver Island long enough to know the forest has a sound of its own. Not just wind in the firs, there's a kind of held breath out here at night. Most calls don't ask you to notice it. This one did. It came just after 1 in the morning. Ecom patched it to our detachment with the same steady tone they use for everything from alarms to break and enters. "Constable, we've got an open 911 line. Phase 2 coordinates put the handset in the hills off Kingfisher, Maine. Confidence radius 80 meters. No voice, just an open channel with intermittent movement, and something that sounds like footfalls. Callback goes straight to dead air." Can you attend? Kingfisher, Maine, is a logging road the public uses when the lake gets busy in summer. In October, with rain sitting in like a quiet decision, nobody goes up there. I acknowledged and asked for a second car. Nights that week were thin. Caldwell was the only other member on. He keyed up from the far end of the zone. I can break free. 10 minutes. Ecom added. We're holding search and rescue on a soft alert. Let us know. The map on my MDT showed the dot pinned somewhere between two switchbacks, where the road runs along a cut bank and the trees press in. 80 meters doesn't sound like much until you picture it at night in timber. I took the highway out of town and then that right-hand turn where asphalt gives up and gravel takes over. The washboard had been graded recently. The cruiser hummed like a low drum. No wind. No rain. Just the kind of fog that makes your headlights a pale wall. Ecom stayed with me on one of the channels. Open line still active, the call taker said. We're hearing periodic crackles and what could be fabric movement. No human voice. No background speech. GPS is drifted 20 meters to the northwest. Still on Kingfisher, Maine. Do you want me to ping the handset? Go ahead, I said and listened. You don't hear the ping on our end. You just wait, pretending you're not counting. The gate at the main was open. Someone from timber had been up there earlier in the day. I nosed through and stopped where the road widened enough for us to stage. Killed the engine. When you shut off a cruiser in the forest, the silence clicks in like a switch. I set the handbrake and let my eyes get used to the dark. Behind the fog was a 3/4 moon, bright enough to make the gravel pale. Caldwell's unit came up the hill a minute later, his headlights making the dust look like smoke. Got anything? He asked, stepping out, jacket zipped high, breath visible. Open line still up, I said. No voice. Coordinates are just beyond that bend. We checked our radios, grabbed extra lights, and let Ecom know we were on foot. Copy, came the reply. Be advised, the open line picked up what sounds like a 3-tone chime. Unknown source could be device-based. Timestamp 20 seconds ago. 3-tone chime. Not the 4-note tone our radios make when you switch zones. Not the 2-beep acknowledgement you get on a key-up. I pocketed the thought and started up the grade. You move differently in the bush when you're listening for a person. You place your feet and you let the night talk to you. Gravel under boot, a little grit sound. Cedar needles soft where the ditch furred up. The road curved left, the cut bank rising to our right like a dark wall. From the trees ahead came the careful drip of water working itself out of branches. I called out, level and even. RCMP. If you can hear me, call out. My voice went out a little way and sank into the fog. The waypoint on the screen shifted a hair, like the handset had taken a half step. Ecom said, update now at your 11 o'clock, 15 meters off the road into the trees. Caldwell angled his light. For trunks. Salal. A mess of blowdown from last winter. It wasn't impassable, just the kind of tangle you don't run through unless you have to. We went in. RCMP, Caldwell tried. Tap on something if you can't speak. The fog caught our beams and made cones that ended in milk. I picked out a faint track boot worn, not animal used by berry pickers in the summer. It went up toward a line of rock and an old service spur that would have once held a radio repeater shack. My mind offered up a memory of a green cabinet on a concrete pad up here. I couldn't tell if I was inventing it. Ecom's voice was steady, not hurried. We've still got carrier, no speech, occasional low-frequency noise on the line. It could be whined across a microphone. Ping returns the same lat divided by long. I said, hold the line. We'll check the spur. We came out of the firs where the trees stepped back around a cut. The ground went from needles to a skim of crushed rock. There was the old spur, exactly where my memory had put it. A short run to a fenced area with a knee-high gate. The fence had a weathered sign. Hydro authorized access only. Inside, on the pad, sat a squat, metal cabinet, painted the municipal green that fades to dull in the salt air. A conduit ran from the ground into its base. No hum, no light. What I'll remember is the sensation of the air being cold and still and yet aware. Like a room when you know there's someone behind the door about to open it. If you're up here and you need help, I said, voice low, we're with the RCMP. We're here to help. Sometimes that's enough to draw a voice. We got nothing but the tiny snap of a twig adjusting to the weight of dew. Ecom. 3-tone chime again. 20 seconds ago. Our tech says it's consistent with some mobile devices when they record or when a notification hits. Nothing definitive. Caldwell looked at me. Could be someone pocket, dialed and walked up, he said. Or dropped their phone. I offered, listening for the thin buzz a device makes when it gets a push. Nothing. The gate was latched with a simple hasp and chain. No lock. I tapped it. The metal gave the dull note of disuse. I glanced at Caldwell. He nodded. We swung it open and stepped onto the pad. The cabinet door had 2 latches. I put my gloved hand on the top one and felt the faint give of it wanting to move. It wasn't locked, just stiff. Hydro property, I said, soft but present, to the dark, like the box might care. We'll have to look if you're in trouble. The latch opened with that old machine sound, a dry, safe click. Inside was a tidy run of components. Breakers, an old analog, timer. A patch panel with labels yellowed to the shade of old newsprint. The kind of infrastructure that used to feed radio equipment that had probably been pulled years ago. No power light glowed, no warmth on the metal. And yet, as the door opened all the way, the smell that came out was not must and old dust. It was fresh metal, like a room where a soldering iron had been put down 5 minutes before. Com, I said. We're at a decommissioned cabinet near the ping. It's open. No power evident. We're going to hold a minute and listen. Copy, said the call taker. For your awareness, the call duration has now exceeded 20 minutes. That's long for an open line. We still have movement. Minor. It matches your path to a degree. Matches our path? Caldwell said, eyebrows up. As in the handset is moving with you, Ecom clarified. Could be tower bounce. Confidence is 60 meters now. We're refining. Caldwell half smiled, the humorless smile we wear when a detail puts a small chill on the back of your neck. We both heard it at the same time off in the trees below the cut. A single, neat knock. Not a branch breaking. The clean sound of knuckles on wood. One and done. RCMP, I called louder. If that's you, knock twice. Silence. Fog has a way of making silence feel like something you could touch. The open line hissed in our ears through the radio, a carrier's presence, without content, only because the call taker held their mic open for a second to let us hear the empty. It was not the kind of silence you get from a disconnected call. There was room in it, the kind you hear when there's a hallway on the other end. We did a short grid from the pad outward, lights low, boots reading the ground as much as eyes. No fresh prints, no slide marks. Old deer slots gone soft at the edges. A patch of ground where a small square thing I thought of a power bank had sat and been picked up. Nothing to seize, nothing to bag. The ping on the MDT crept 10 meters upslope, then dropped back to where it had been. Tower switching, Ecom said, apologetic by habit even when it's the system doing what systems do. Confidence back to 80. I admit to doing something I normally wouldn't. I took my phone out and dialed the handset number displayed in the CAD, knowing it would go nowhere. It rang once at my ear. In the forest, nothing rang. On the open line at Ecom, the call taker's voice said, a little surprised, "We just heard a single ring on the open call, then the chime again." Caldwell heard my phone ring and shook his head. "We're chasing a signal," he said almost to himself. We gave it time. 10 minutes on the pad, 10 more along the spur. After an hour, the call dropped on its own. "Line disconnected," Ecom said. "No further attempts to dial out. We'll tag and hold the audio if you want to listen back." "We do," I said. "We'll do one more pass, then clear." We did the pass. We cleared. On the way back down to the cruisers, the fog had thinned enough that the stars had a say. Something small skittered across the road ahead. Probably a vole. An owl made the soft punctuation sound they make when they've seen what they need to see. At the detachment, after the kind of coffee that only exists on nights like that, we sat with the Ecom clip in a quiet office. They'd scrubbed it as much as policy lets them. Loudness normalized. Peaks kept. You could hear the soft scuff of our boots in places timestamps matched where their analysis suggested the handset moved with us. You could hear the pause when we'd stopped at the gate. You could hear that three-tone chime, a clean, almost cheerful little trio of notes that didn't match any notification I recognized. At one point, you could hear a single knock. That was the one we'd heard. It came in like a small, exact punctuation mark. No voice. Not mine, not Caldwell's, not anyone's. No distant conversation. The sound floor was a room's. We wrote it the way you write a thing that refuses to be more than it is. Attended Kingfisher, Maine for 911 open line. Coordinates placed handset near decommissioned hydro cabinet. Area search negative for persons. No signs of distress or struggle. Environmental conditions: fog, cool, light wind nil. Unexplained sounds noted. Single knock, intermittent chime. E. Calm, audio attached. UTL divided by go. You learn those 4 letters early. Unable to locate. Gone on arrival. Honest, accurate, almost always enough. A few days later, Hydro sent a technician on their own, not at our request, but because someone in their office still had stewardship over that green box on a list. He called me from the pad. Nothing live in there, he said, easy, friendly. No power, breakers open. The patch panel's an old one. Wouldn't ring if you sang to it. He laughed, not unkind. Could be a handset up there. People hike. Folks drop things. Your chime might be a phone doing something on its own. He paused. Funny thing though, he added. When I opened the cabinet, smelled fresh metal. Like someone soldered an hour ago. There's no evidence of it. Just smell. Probably nothing. Probably nothing is one of those phrases professionals use when the world resists being simple. The file stayed quiet until the rain turned to the kind of sleet that uses the road like a drum. Then, a month later, another open 911 from almost the same spot. ECOM attached it to our previous CAD. Different call taker, same careful tone. This time, the confidence radius stuck to 40 meters and the ping walked up the spur while we were still putting on our jackets at the detachment. By the time we got to the gate, the call had gone long enough to make you think someone was deliberately holding it. Again, no voice. Again, the chime. This time, one more detail. On the recording, there was a soft hiss, like breath on a microphone, followed by a sound I can only describe as fabric being smoothed over a flat surface. A sleeve on a tabletop, a hand on a jacket. We went through the motions again. You don't stop doing the job because a detail is odd. We cleared the area, checked the pad, walked the line of the trees. We let the forest alone for a while and listened until it returned to being the forest. And then we left. It never turned dramatic. No figure in the fog. No lost hiker waving a light. No prankster jumping out, though we considered that and were ready for it. Over the winter, there were 3 more calls, all between midnight and 3, all with the same unresolved awareness to them. In spring, the calls stopped. Hydro pulled the cabinet that summer. I drove past and saw the pad bare, gravel raked, a rectangle of lighter ground where metal had been. The woods grew right up to the edge of the concrete, green and uncomplicated. When people hear a story like this, they want the hanging thread tied into something you can put in a report and feel finished. The most honest thing I can say is that technology does strange things in places our maps still treat like blank space. Cell phones ping towers that make poor sense to people on the ground. GPS drifts. Batteries do what they want in cold air. The more honest thing, and I only ever say this when somebody asks me what it felt like to be there, is that the space around that green box had the same alive quiet you get in a room where someone is about to speak and then decides to wait. Not threatening, just aware. I still get calls from ECOM about open lines on logging roads. 99 out of 100 are pocket dials from people hauling boats or checking on their property. And when you call back, they answer with that embarrassed, apologetic Canadian voice, and you both smile and carry on. When one lands in the hills and holds on long enough to draw us out, I put on my jacket, I drive until gravel takes the place of asphalt. I turn off the engine and let the night have its say. I call out like a person might need me, and if I hear a small, neat knock from the trees, I note it in the report. Wedge repositioned. Gate unlatched. Chime heard. We don't craft ghost stories. We write what happened. The forest keeps the rest. Story number 4. I'm a senior constable with the New South Wales Police Force, posted down on the far south coast. It's one of those stretches of Australia where the sea is right there with you, even inland. You feel it in the air and in the way the gulls drift miles from the shore like they forgot to turn back. Our nights are quiet more often than not, pub noise at closing, wallabies on the highway, the odd alarm chirping at a servo. When the unusual comes, it doesn't arrive with fanfare. It just sits calmly on the channel until you go and have a look. Comms put it out at 1:46. All units, open 000 call. AML coordinates place the caller at Green Cape Headland, near the lighthouse precinct. No voice. Open carrier, with intermittent wind noise, and what may be a mechanical tone. Callback fails. NPWS request check. The dispatcher's tone was flat, a habit born from not feeding the nervous part of your brain anything extra. I keyed up from Eden. 23. King copy. I'll take that. ETA 20. Another unit in Marimbula was tied up on a domestic. Marine rescue was offline for the night. Comms added, Parks have a ranger en route to unlock. They say the staff quarters are shut. No tours today. They're concerned because the caller ID is presenting as a fixed service that was decommissioned. That made me sit up a notch. Caller ID, from a deadline, isn't a ghost story. It's usually a back-end hiccup. Still, a precise place like a lighthouse cuts out the wiggle room you get in town. AML, the advanced mobile location data we get when a newer handset dials 000, had thrown a dot right on the path between the keeper's cottage and the tower. Radius 20 meters. That's not much out there. You'd be near the fence and the sign where they tell you to watch your step on the stairs. The road into Green Cape is long gravel and slow bends. At night, it's like driving through a hallway where the walls keep a respectful distance. The sky was cloudless, stars enough to make you think the horizon had a light. I could smell the salt before I could hear the ocean faint, like a memory of it. I told comms when I turned off the bitumen. Copy. 23. King. AML update. Handset appears stationary. We still have an open line. No voice content. Call taker reports periodic low-frequency tone. 2-second interval. Low-frequency tone. I pictured the old foghorn before I could help it, even though I knew they'd decommissioned that decades ago. The gate to the headland was chained at night. The NPWS Ranger Dave, a man who always looks like he's just walked uphill, met me with a torch at his hip and a lanyard full of keys. Sorry to drag you out, he said, and his breath fogged, but the night didn't feel cold enough for it. We've had prank calls from the car park before, but this one's, well. The ID popped as the old payphone in the cottage. Telstra pulled it years ago, and comms said the AML is dead center between the cottage and the tower. He unlocked the gate, and we drove in slow, tires crunching in a way that makes you think of stepping on shells. If you've never been to a lighthouse at night, there's a particular hush to it. Not silence, just a sense that the place is presently doing a job, and you're a guest. The tower sat dark. Automation means the beacon doesn't paint the clouds anymore like it did when I was a kid. The keeper's cottage is a low building with a veranda, and a railing people lean on during tours to look at the edge of the world. Dave and I parked near the signboard. He pointed to the cottage. That room there was where the payphone was, he said. We kept it after service discontinued, just to look period for visitors. Now it's gone. Telstra took the block. There's still a red emergency handset in the tower for marine rescue, if the radio dies, but its line is physically cut. I've seen the stub. Comms, I said. 23. King on scene at Green Cape with NPWS. We'll have a walk. Any change? Negative, the dispatcher said. Open line still up. Call taker is hearing that tone, one long, two short, approximately every 90 seconds. Text suggests it's not a handset notification. It could be environmental. I didn't like that it had a pattern. Environmental noise that repeats isn't something you often get at the sea unless a buoy's moved close to shore. There wasn't one here. We did it the way you should. Slow, with eyes, ears, and a little patience. Police, I called, even though there was no one to hear unless there was. We got a call from here. If you can hear me, answer back. My voice went out, hit some surface I couldn't name, and softened. The fence around the tower was latched. Dave keyed it open. Inside, The base of the tower held an old first aid cabinet and a bench with a sign asking people not to leave rubbish. A register book for volunteers sat open on a table, a pen on a string, dates ending last weekend. The red emergency phone was mounted to the wall near the door into the spiral stairs. It had a big pull-down cover and instructions for direct dial to marine rescue. The cord ran down into a conduit capped with a tidy seal and a tag, "Line isolated, do not use." I pulled the cover. The handset sat heavy, the way those old ones do. I lifted it, not expecting, not wanting, anything. No dial tone. Dead. I set it back exactly, letting the cradle right itself. For no reason I could explain, I rested my palm on the little press-to-talk bar on the handle. The plastic was cold. "Comms," I said. "We're at the tower. Emergency phone present. Appears disconnected. No visible persons. Hearing only surf. If control can try a callback, we'll listen." The dispatcher said, "Understood. Attempting. Stand by." We stood. The night pressed its awareness into the space. Far below, the sea made its slow, steady sound. From the cottage veranda, 2 little solar lights blinked as if they were not entirely committed to being functional. The callback attempt didn't ring here. It wouldn't. But in my earpiece, where comms had the call taker in my other ear, I heard a tiny sound. 3 notes. Soft. Not the 2-tone Australian busy, and not the standard ring. Not even like my mobile. Like a buoy bell played on a keyboard. I didn't mention it. You get cautious about giving your mind directions on nights like that. We went up the spiral stairs. They're stone, worn in the middle from 100 years of shoes. The rail was cool. Halfway up, there's a small landing with a window that frames the headland's edge and the black water beyond. That window was latched, dust in the corners like flour. We went on. At the service room under the lens room, there's another small door. That one was shut. The padlock was new, and Dave had to shuffle keys. He opened it, we stepped in, and the air inside had the stored cold smell of a museum after hours. On a shelf sat a brass wick trimmer from the oil days, and a card explaining it to tourists. The lantern room above us, where nobody goes at night, was quiet like a sleeping engine. 23, King, comm said, for awareness. Tech flagged that the caller ID is the payphone block that used to be at Green Cape Cottage. They say it should be impossible for it to present into the system. They're checking logs. Dave met my eye when that came across. "You hearing the foghorn?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "Are you?" He shook his head. "But if comms tells me they hear a horn, I'll pretend I didn't." We stood in that service room longer than we needed to. I think both of us were letting the place tell us. Nothing now. Nothing here. Then, from below us, towards the cottage, came the lightest sound of a door closing. Not wind, the careful kind, where someone holds the handle and puts it home. We both stopped against our own will, like our boots had leaned for us. "Could be wildlife," Dave said, almost before I could think it. "Wombats do doors now?" I asked, and he smiled without humor. "They do everything else." We went back down. The tower door was still latched as we'd left it. We crossed to the cottage. The veranda boards had that hard, salty feel through the soles of your boots. Dave unlocked, and we stepped into a room that was all polished wood and old photos of ships. Where the payphone had been mounted was a rectangle of slightly cleaner paint and 4 tidy holes. A laminated card still hung nearby explaining to kids what a payphone was. Telstra collected this handset in 2019, it said beneath a logo. Services discontinued. In the next room, a volunteer's kettle sat upside down on a tea towel with a cup beside it and 2 sugar granules that had gone sticky and dried. In a corner was a radio that visitors can listen to hear marine traffic. Its power cord was unplugged. I checked the switchboard by the back door. Main breaker off. "Comms," I said. "In the cottage. All appears secured. No live lines. Any change to the call?" They came back with something I've only had happen once before, and it put a coldness in the thin space under my ribs. "We're patching you a short playback. 23 King," the dispatcher said. "This is from 90 seconds ago on the open line." There was a small click as they fed the audio to me. First, our room tone. I heard our own quiet steps. The faintness told me the mic on the other end wasn't in our pocket. Then I heard a voice. It was my voice, the way it sounds when you speak low, to be considerate in a place that has its own hush. Police. I heard myself say on the clip. We got a call from here. If you can hear me, answer back. The words I had said outside the tower fence 6 minutes earlier. Exactly. And then, laid under it, a soft reply. Not a word. A breath that could have been the sea, if the sea could speak between notes. Then the line went to that open, patient quiet again. I held my radio, not liking the feeling in my blood. I don't say things like, "That's impossible," because experience will make a liar of you. I said, "Copy," because you stick to the script when your brain wants to stray. Dave opened his mouth and closed it again. That wasn't fear. It was respect. We finished the search. We checked the cottages end to end, the sheds with the emergency gear, the little museum room where they show kids how prisms made light into something larger than itself. Nothing out of place. Outside, the sky was brighter, the Milky Way like chalk. The sound came again, 3 notes, small and exact. Not from a speaker. Like the night decided to make them. We both heard it, and both chose not to say so. "Comms," I said. "No persons located. No signs of entry. Request logging of audio and caller ID anomaly. NPWS will resecure. We'll do a final exterior check." They acknowledged and added, "For your report, Telstra advised the presenting service ID belongs to a payphone block, retired from service and hard-held, disconnected. They are unable to explain how it entered our trunks." We walked the path towards the cliff fence with our torches off, letting our eyes carry more than the beams. The edge where the land stopped and the sea began is straight and clean there. No swell big enough to make a fuss that night. From beyond the fence, somewhere down and to the right, came a sound I had not thought about for years. A fog signal, exactly once, low and full, the sort that goes through your bones before your ears. It was not loud. It was not close. It was delivered with the same confidence a lighthouse would have had when ships needed steering. Old systems sometimes do a trick in your head. "Sometimes the trick is your head," Dave quietly said. "You heard that." Like he was checking reality at arm's length. "I did," I replied, and left it at that. We locked up. He signed his log. I signed mine. He gave me a nod, people, save for when they're agreeing to keep something both ordinary and slightly bigger than ordinary inside the same sentence. On the drive back, comms told me the line dropped on its own at 2:38. They pushed the audio to my inbox. The next day, because procedure matters, I called Marine Rescue and asked if their radios had burped during the window. They said no. I called Telstra's security contact and gave the event number so they could look at their switch logs. The telco tech on the phone, a woman who'd been doing it for 20 years, said, "I've seen old blocks ghost into the network, but not with AML. Thing is, the AML came off a mobile, right? And the caller ID came off a dead fixed line. It's not one device. 2 things presenting at once. It's not standard." Her tone said she'd say more if she could. I wrote what she did say. I didn't write what I thought. 3 nights later, at roughly the same time, comms sent us again. Another open line 000. Same dot on the headland. This time, Marimbula's crew came too. We all met Dave at the gate. The night felt warmer, the air more ordinary. We went through the motions, the good, solid ones. At the tower, the red emergency handset sat like a museum piece. In the cottage, the rectangle on the wall was still in absence. On the recording from comms after, we heard the same quiet, the same patient tone. Only one difference. Between 2 long quiets, a soft clatter, like porcelain, set gently down on wood. A cup and saucer. I didn't add drama to it. I wrote, "Sound consistent with ceramic contact." It tapered off after that. A park's electrician looked at the tower phone and shook his head. "Line's not going anywhere," he said, showing me where the copper was capped. The headland was itself. The sea turned, and our calls became fuel theft, neighbor disputes, the things you can point at and fix. Weeks later, Telstra emailed to say their logs showed an unanswered start to a payphone line presentation at exactly the time of our first call. No call route established, their report said. No billing event. At the bottom, in a little italic bit, the tech had added, "We suspect old card behavior from a remote exchange. Investigations continuing." I liked the modesty of the word suspect. It leaves room for the human experience. And we had ours. On the rare evenings I get off early, I take my kids to the lookout there when it's bright. We read the boards and we point to ships, and we talk about what the light meant before everything had satellite. They lean on the rail in the same place I stood, and the sea makes the same sound it makes for everyone. If I'm alone, I sometimes stand by the fence and listen for 3 small notes. The shock has gone out of it. In its place is something steadier, the way a place that's done a job for a long time keeps doing it even if the hardware changes. A lot can be explained by wires, logs, and old systems that groan in their sleep. Some things can only be written down as they happened. A dot on a screen by a tower, a call with no voice, a tone that arrived at 90-second intervals, a recording that carried my own words back to me from the recent past. The job on nights like that is not to decide what it was. It's to go, to knock, to call out, to listen until the place settles. Then to go back to the car, key the mic, tell comms what you found, and drive on. Story number 5. I've been with the Autobahnpolizei long enough to know the motorway at 3 in the morning has its own kind of weather. Even on a dry, still night, there's a current in the air that runs alongside the lanes. The sound of tires is softer then. Headlights show you more sky than road. It's not dramatic. It's patient. You learn to hear it. Lightstel rang us up on 110 just after 2:20. Streifen 5-2, open line emergency call presenting as a fixed roadside unit near kilometer marker 206 on the A10 outer ring, southbound side. Call taker reports steady open carrier, intermittent wind noise, occasional click. No voice content confirmed. Callback attempts not possible. Autobahnmeisterei requests police check. The dispatcher's voice was flat in the good way, the way that lets the situation be itself. She added, almost like an afterthought. For your awareness, the call is flagged as Notrufsoil ID 1987. That column was decommissioned 2 years ago during roadworks. My partner Neumann glanced up from the MDT. A call box that doesn't exist calling 110. He said, checking our fuel. And the tire pressure lights out of habit. I keyed up, 5-2 Anfahrt. ETA, 8 minutes from the Abzweig. Liedstel replied, copy. 5-2. Note. Autobahnmeisterei have a crew on standby if you need access beyond barriers. The A10 was modest that night. A few LKWs spaced by kilometers, a handful of cars. The overhead gantries were all green. The sky was the kind of high overcast that hides stars, but doesn't threaten rain. Our car hummed at a steady 140. Nothing to rush for, nothing to dawdle over. We took the rightmost lane near the kilometer posts, and let the numbers step us down towards 206. Open line still active, the call taker said in my ear after a moment. We are hearing what might be the click of a handset being handled. No speech. There is also a short 2-tone pulse approximately every 90 seconds, unknown source. I thought of the old acoustic tones some of the columns emitted when they connected to the network in the 80s. My mind didn't need much prompting to supply the thought of a simple, patient sound living in the concrete somewhere. We pulled onto the Standstreifen at 206, with our hazards running a slow orange. A lay-by there had been closed during the rebuild, just a fenced rectangle of old asphalt, and a row of capped stanchions where lights used to be. The Notrufsoil, if it had still stood, would have been mounted where the fence now ran. Instead, there was a neat cap on a conduit, and a square on the ground where a base plate had been lifted away. You could smell old bitumen when the breeze turned. We put on our reflective vests. Neumann set out the warning triangle, although at that hour, the nearest set of lights behind us was a truck a minute away. We crossed to the far side of the closed lay-by gate and peered through the mesh. The Autobahnmeisterei does tidy work. No cable tails left. Every cut had a cap. A sign on the fence read, Bostel betreten verboten, like a stern parent. Liedstel, I said into my mic. 5-2 on scene. KM 206 southbound. Closed lay. By present. Visual. On former Notre soil footprint. Column is gone. Can you confirm the presenting ID? Confirmed, she said. It's the old column's ID. Our tech suggests the trunk might be presenting off-hook from further up the chain. We can patch audio if you want to hear what the handler hears. Biddy? I replied. And we stood there in our own quiet while the radio did its little click. That means you're about to share something you can't point at. What came through wasn't eerie, so much as precise. The room tone of a device listening. A steady, low hiss. That wasn't static so much as absence. Then the faintest flutter of movement close to the microphone, something brushing near it, like cloth moving, or fingers. Then a distant bring that didn't belong to any mobile I've carried. Not a ring so much as the ghost of one, short, as if the line had thought of ringing, and then changed its mind. Could be wind at the relay, Neumann said quietly. Could be, I said. He stepped to the fence and looked along the line of the verge. The grass there is cut back twice a year, leaving a skinny strip of long stalks near the fence. He angled his torch down. No recent footprints in the soft, he said. I looked for tire marks where someone might have gone around the barrier. The gravel wore old tracks, rain, softened. We asked Leitstell to notify the Autobahnmeisterei that we might need the lay-by gate unlocked. A white service truck trundled up 10 minutes later, the orange beacon on its roof making a patient sweep. The driver, a man with a beard, and the resigned cheerfulness of all road workers at night, introduced himself as Frank. The call box there is gone, he said, gesturing with his chin. We cut and capped the copper. Telecom pulled the pair from the cabinet at the rest stop. You're hearing a gremlin. He fished out the key, popped the padlock, and pushed the gate open. We stepped inside. The asphalt had that hollow sound it gets when it's old and is warmed and cooled too. Many times, by the old base plate spot, the conduit cap sat like a little puck. I crouched and felt around it cold plastic, no give. I lifted my eyes along the chain of stanchions. 30 meters down, at the end of the lay-by, stood a gray cabinet the size of a washing machine, the site's distribution box. No power light, no hum. A telecom sticker half peeled, like everything else about the place wanted to volunteer that it was no longer in charge of anything. I rested my palm against the cabinet and felt nothing but the night's cool. The latch door opened under Frank's key with a soft resistance. Inside, tidy rows. Distribution strips with old copper pairs slotted and labeled. A few jumpers still in place. Most pairs wrapped and tagged, still a gun. No lead to look at. Just numbers and neatness. And yet the smell that rose was fresh, not like dust or old plastic. It smelled faintly like metal warmed a moment ago, the way equipment smells when it's been awake. Leitstell, I said, my voice a little lower because the night makes you considerate. We are at the site's cabinet. No power. Distribution present. Any change on the call? The dispatcher said, 1 moment. There was a pause. Then, yes, open line. Still up. We have a new detail. The call taker just heard a faint female voice. 1 word. Unclear. Could be hello. Could be wind. We're tagging the clip. You could feel the shift in Neumann's posture. It wasn't fear, just that little lean people do when a thing they can't see moves closer. We did what we always do. We looked for a person first. We walked the length of the fence. We peered under the guardrail. We scanned the ditch. The night returned the steady hum of distant traffic. Nothing else. Back at the cabinet, I put my ear near the distribution strips, even though that's not how anything works. Silence. Frank craned his neck at the labels. That one, he said, tapping with a knuckle, used to be the pair to the column. See? 1987. Cut, wrapped, nothing there. He seemed to want to convince the night as much as us. There was a second of breath over the radio. Then Leitstell, a little cautious. 5-2. I'm going to play you 10 seconds from the open line. Received 2 minutes ago. The clip came across. Room tone. The suggestion of wind. And then my voice, in miniature, in the distance saying, Leitstell, 5-2 on scene. Not live. The words I'd spoken 5 minutes earlier, now arriving from the wrong direction. Under that, softer, a voice that might have been a woman saying, "Bit," and the soft tick a handset cradle makes if someone sets it down gently. It didn't make me jump. It made my shoulders draw together, the way they do when a detail doesn't fit anywhere. Neumann pressed his lips together, his version of a swear without the word. Frank shifted his weight and looked at the ground, respectful in the way men who work at the side of the road learn to be in the face of weather and traffic and other kinds of big things. We asked Lightstell to check their logs for another similar call. They came back with, 2 nights ago at 2:12, an open line from the same ID presented for 40 seconds, then dropped. No units were nearby. It was closed as a trunk error. No audio retained. The thing about a second time is that it changes how you hold your torch. We walked a bit more. Across the carriageway, on the northbound side, there had been another lay-by. That one was still open. I told Neumann I wanted to stand by the guardrail and listen to the sound across the way for a minute. We did, and there, as a lorry's taillights dwindled, we both heard it, a short, crisp ring, as if from a phone not 10 meters away on a table. But there was no table, only the fence and old air. The ring didn't echo. It didn't come again. It felt like a neat dot put at the end of a sentence we hadn't written. We did a last slow scan, then thanked Frank and had him lock up. On the way back to the car, the motorway did its steady work, and the night seemed uninterested in us again. "Lightstell," I said when we were in the driver's seat, 5 to 2 clearing key M206. No persons found. No signs of entry or tampering. Please tag audio and the presenting ID anomaly for Telecom and the Autobahnmeisterei. Received, the dispatcher said. The line dropped 3 minutes ago. On its own. Back at the Dienststelle, we sat in the small office with the soundproof door where you can play back call audio without adding the station's rattles to it. The clip was better on good speakers. You could hear the difference in space as the open line existed wherever it was. We listened to my own words recorded at the wrong time, and the soft reply. We listened to the faint click that could have been plastic on plastic, and we listened to that two-tone pulse that arrived at roughly 90-second intervals, a sound I eventually recognized as not a phone, but the little tone some maintenance systems emit when they're ready for a check. The Autobahnmeisterei tech later told me it sounded like the heartbeat of an old field unit calling in to a mother it didn't have anymore. We wrote the report like you should write one. Times, positions, names, observed conditions, actions taken, requests made, presentation of decommissioned Notrufsoil ID 1987-110 system, open line with intermittent sound, no human located, Telecom notified, Autobahnmeisterei present. You leave the edge off the sentence when you don't need it. The following night, just after 2, the open line presented again, different dispatcher, same careful tone. We were already on the ring after clearing a broken-down car at 210, so we acknowledged and slid down the Standstreifen to 206. Frank met us again, less surprised this time. I wasn't asleep anyway, he said in that German way that means, I'm not going to complain because what's the point? We stood inside the fence and listened to the same patient nothing. We heard the short ring once more, not close to us, not far. Lightstell patched another clip. This time, the soft voice said something that caught in the air like a thread. Schnell, bitte. Quickly, please. All the hair on my arms decided it wasn't a silly reflex. We called Telecom's Bereitschaft, the on-call technician for the region. He arrived yawning an hour later in a white van that had seen enough kilometers to have an attitude. He introduced himself as Lorenz, produced a handheld meter, and clipped it to the distribution strip. He showed us the display. Flat. No line. Dead as anything, he said, cheerfully offended on behalf of good engineering. He opened a second cabinet 200 meters away, where the site's pairs joined the main. Sometimes water will do a trick, he said. And your system thinks a loop is a handset lifted. It's embarrassing, but not spiritual. He smiled in the way of a man who didn't want to step on anyone's story with his facts, but knew his facts had been what kept the lights on. He tapped a jumper with his pen. Here's your old column. Isolated. There is nowhere for it to go. What about the ID presentation? Neumann asked. Lorenz shrugged. Old systems present old names. We change the field devices, but the exchange can keep a tag. Our logging says, you won't believe me. Last night, Something presented with that ID and then withdrew. No call path established, no tariff, just a hello. He spread his hands. Maybe a small voltage spike. Maybe a very old card humming to itself. No one made a joke. The Autobahn feels like a place you should treat politely even when there's nothing to believe. The calls came 3 more times that week. Always between 2 and 3. Always the same dot on the screen. Sometimes we could go. Sometimes another unit took the check. The audio was always the same space. The same soft click. The same patient two-tone. Once, during a quiet stretch, we heard the distant wash of a car pass on the recording, a second after the same car passed us on the shoulder. The line was listening to our present from a place that was not attached to anything. And then they stopped. Telecom pulled an old card at an exchange up the road. Lorenz emailed me later to say it was, as a precaution. The Autobahnmeisterei replaced the distribution strips in the cabinet. Frank sent me a photo with a thumbs up. The lay-by stayed closed. Work moved on. The nights returned to wrong-way drivers and foxes trotting along the hard shoulder and the parts of the job you can point at. Months afterward, on a drive home off duty, I took the long way round the ring. The sky was the color of late autumn, the kind that doesn't tell you what it wants to do until it does it. I pulled into a rest area with coffee that knows it's coffee but doesn't try too hard. When I got back in my car, I sat for a minute and listened to the motorway move. Far off, a siren on the other carriageway did that Doppler bend and went on. If you've done this job long enough, you learn to be grateful for the things that don't become stories. And when something does, you learn to let it be the size it is. A decommissioned Notruf presenting an open line with a patient little sound, a voice that may have said, quickly, please, and my own words coming back after they'd already been used. You write it. You attach the audio. You call the people who look after the cabinets with meters and laughter. And you go to the next thing. Sometimes, very late, my ear will pull a blank. Single, crisp ring out of the white noise of tires and wind around the car, and I'll think of the neat square where a base plate used to be and a tidy plastic cap pressed over a dark conduit. It doesn't frighten me. It just puts me in mind of how systems, roads, phones, people keep traces of what they were built to do. We answer. We stand at the fence. We listen for a person who might need us. And if we hear only the small sound of a line saying, still here, we nod at the night and let the motorway carry on. Story number 6. I'm Guardia Civil de Tráfico, stationed out of the subsector in Lyon. Nights on the N630 are a different rhythm than the day you hear the trucks before you see them. You can tell a slope by how a diesel breathes. And the old road over the mountains has a patience the autopista never learned. There's a stretch before Puerto de Pajares where the hairpins stack like someone dropped a coil of ribbon and left it there. In winter, the maintenance crews keep it salted, but even when the surface is good, the air itself feels like it's leaning. The call came in to our patrol just before 3. Centro de Atención a Emergencias, 112. Patched it to Tráfico with the steady tone they use for everything from a cow on the carriageway to a rollover. Patrulla Leon 6, the operator said, clear and calm. We have an automatic e-call from a vehicle. Minimum set of data shows location on N630 PK99, approaching the hairpin at El Corralón. Direction north, e-call type automatic. No voice response on the open line. Call has remained active for 3 minutes. Do you copy? Automatic e-call means the car decided something had happened without a person pressing anything. Usually an airbag deployment, a crash sensor, sometimes a manual trigger if the driver pokes the SOS. The data bundle MSD gives us a dot, a direction, a timestamp, precise to the second, the VIN, sometimes the fuel type. Our consoles make it look simple. Real world never is. Leon size copies, I replied, heading to PK99 from Campomanes, ETA 10. My partner that night, Luna, was quiet as always when he's thinking. We'd been finishing paperwork in the quartel when the tone hit. He folded the forms and slid them under the radio like he'd left them there on purpose. Outside, the cold made the cruiser's engine sound crisp. The dot on our screen sat right on a tight left bender with a stone culvert on the outside. In old snow years, the plows used to pile ice there, and the road would feel narrower than it was. Now the winter was cold but dry. We went up behind one of the straining trucks, passed when it was safe, Watched the kilometer posts count down. The only other set of lights we saw was a van pulled into a lay-by, with the driver asleep on the wheel, flashes of a football game on his phone lighting his face. "Comms," Luna said into his mic. "Leon Sace en Ruta." "Any more detail? Occupants? Language?" The operator came back. "MSD indicates 2 seat positions occupied at trigger moment. Unknown if sensors are accurate post-event. Language flag unsent. Open line is up, but no voice has responded." The call taker reports intermittent click and low-frequency noise, possibly wind. The hairpin at PK99 looks different at night. The black of the drop holds itself just below the guardrail, the way a well holds water. We found where the dot sat and swung onto the shoulder before the bend, our rotativos painting the rock face amber. I killed the siren and left the beacons. The world went immediately to that big sky quiet mountains have when there's no traffic. The engine ticked as if to agree. "Guardia Civil," I called, stepping out with my jacket fastened to the chin. "If you can hear me, call out." My voice took 2 steps and lay down. Luna went the other way, toward the inside of the bend. We both scanned for the signs you look for that don't put gore into your head, bits of plastic where they don't belong. A scuff in gravel, a fresh paint scrape on steel. The guardrail there wore scars, but they were old orange rust where silver had once been. No fresh scrape, no steam, no coolant smell, no glass glittering like frost. "Comms," I said. "We're at the dot. No vehicle in the carriageway. Do you have any vertical offset on the location? Sometimes the e-call's lat divided by long sits right under you, and the car is 40 meters down a slope." "Negative," they said. "Horizontal accuracy, 5 meters. Altitude data, unreliable." Luna was already at the outside rail, with his torch angled into the scrub. That hillside falls into a tangle of broom and young beech, then steepens, then finds the culvert's cut. It's not a place a car disappears without telling you it did. We did it by the book. One walked forward 3 bends to check the running line for debris. The other went to the outside and shouted, listened, shouted again, in both Spanish and the plain words that carry when nothing else will. Luna called, "Hola, Guardia Civil," and then, "Police call back," because there are drivers from everywhere up there, and English gets you coverage. The night gave us what night gives, a thin wind finding a stone somewhere and making a small regular tone that could be anything once your mind decides to label it. "Leon Sace," came comms again. "For your awareness, the e-call's open channel has a periodic tone, 3 short notes, repeating every 80-90 seconds. The operator notes a click consistent with a hazard relay. No speech. Hazard relay. I didn't like that. It made me think of a working car somewhere nearby with its indicators ticking in the dark and nobody to answer them. We went below the rail. There's a maintenance access just past the bend. A little gate that goes to the culvert for when the Confederacion has to clear blockages. Luna checked the lock. It was shut. He shone his light through. The culvert was dry, a ribbon of stone with graffiti from kids who had gone there in the summer to do what kids do. I looked up, and along the slope at the places a car could thread itself if it took the rail and tried to fly. No fresh crush in the broom. No tire tear in the leaves. Nothing new. "Comms," I said. "Ask 112 if the call can be bounced." Sometimes the handset will respond if the operator asks a yes divided by no. Also, "Can you confirm the VIN?" The operator read numbers and letters to me. I wrote them in my little notebook because muscle memory owns that action. The VIN's WMI told me a German make. The sequential bits meant nothing to me. I pictured a mid-size, maybe a saloon. MSD time stamps the trigger at 2 hours 50, 3 minutes and 14 seconds, the operator added. We opened voice at 2 hours 50, 3 minutes and 20 seconds. No response. "Copy," I said. Luna looked at me over the top of his torch beam. He didn't need to say it out loud. If something had gone wrong, we should have a sign. If there was a car in sight of that guardrail, it would have given us some piece of itself to point to. We stood, we listened, we gave it time, because time sometimes tells you what happened when a place refuses to. Then we went back to the cruiser and drove the next 2 kilometers. Then the 2 before. Nothing. Comm stayed with us. "Line has stayed up," the operator said. "No change. It may time out on its own." We told them we were returning to PK99 to hold another 10 minutes, and then we'd clear unless anything new presented. Back at the bend, With our lights low and the night deciding it was going to be even stiller, I could hear a sound I might have missed before. Not the wind, not the creak. A tiny tick-tick, almost exactly like the sound a turn signal makes when you're sitting in a car waiting for an opening. It seemed to come from downslope, and the moment I noticed it, it was gone. Luna looked at me and gave me the smallest nod. He'd heard it too. We can throw resources, but we have to be honest with them. The Bomberos de Mieres, on the Asturias side, were asleep for good reason. And calling them without a point to anchor to would be theater. Still, I got comms to ring 112 Asturias to coordinate, the way we do on that border for weather and trucks and, sometimes, cows. They told us they had nothing on their side and would be on the frequency if we needed them. We let the mountain tell us no one was there to save. The e-call dropped at 3:28. The line going dead, without drama. "Leon Seiss," said the operator. "Call has ended. We'll retain the audio for your attestado." We logged what we had. Time, position, actions, negative findings. Back at the quartel, Coffee made the paperwork more honest. We asked 112 to push the audio. In the little room off the main office with the door that almost shuts, we listened. It wasn't a horror film. It was a machine talking in its small way to a person who was also a machine. A soft, low rumble like wind below threshold. A click every now and then that could have been a relay or a person's jacket zip touching plastic. At one point, a series of 3 light tones, cheerful and businesslike. Later, a sequence that sounded exactly like a hazard relay, the way a mechanic hears one. No voice saying help. No breath that I could swear was human. Just space. We ran the VIN through DGT. It came back clean. The registration matched a car registered in Oviedo. No report of theft. No previous e-call. We called the number associated with the owner the next day, when the desk sergeant was willing to babysit our forms for 10 minutes. A sleepy man picked up and, with the suspicion of anyone who doesn't know why the Guardia Civil might be calling at 9, told me his car was in his garage and had not moved the night before. "My wife will confirm," he added. We watched a film. The kids were with their grandmother. He read me the plate. It matched the VIN in the DGT record. His car had the capability to call, but it hadn't. We thanked him, told him to contact a workshop if any lights came up on his dash. He told me he would. He sounded like a nice man who didn't need to think about us anymore. 2 nights later, at almost exactly the same time, 112 sent the tone again. "E-call automatic," the operator said. "Same VIN, same location, same direction flag. Open line, no voice." My stomach didn't drop. It settled. We went. The road was the road, the bend was the bend, the outside was the outside. No new scrapes, no new anything. The sound came again, that tiny pulse, from nowhere specific. We did our walk down. We did our call-outs. We watched a small gust push leaves in a pocket by the culvert and pretended it told us something. It didn't. We escalated in the way you do in real life, when a detail keeps returning without becoming an emergency. 112's tech got involved. Telefonica's PSAP engineer sent an email that used words like routing anomaly and legacy exchange and MSD header duplication. Our own people at the sector called DGT's systems contact. We all agreed to look at it. It was all professional and measured. At 3 in the morning, the next call still came and we still went out and the mountain still behaved itself. The third time, comms patched us. Mid-response, a clip of the live audio. "Listen to this," the operator said. "The way people do when they're trying not to sound like they have a feeling about what they're about to play." There was the rumble. There was the tick. Under that, there was the faintest ghost of voice. And I don't like putting that word on a radio transmission because it sounds like a class of story I don't tell at work. But it was there. Something that could have been a human making an impatient noise, the kind of you emit when a seatbelt won't unroll or a glove won't go on. Nothing more. It did not help us. It unnerved me. We pulled the incident files for that spot for the last decade. There had been a bad one. 4 winters back, a lorry had jackknifed and pushed a car against the rail. The occupants of the car had been hurt but alive. Before e-call, cleanup crews had done their work. No cliffside missing piece. The only fatal I found in the database for that kilometer post was older, the year before I joined Trafico. It was on paper, not in the digital system. A photo in black and white, where the flash had thrown the rail into stark relief and the car beyond it had looked smaller than cars ever look in real life. The report was written in the careful square hand of a compañero who'd retired to raise goats. The time of day was different, the weather worse, different registration, a different kind of vehicle. Nothing in it gave me a hook to hang these calls on. I called the owner of the VIN again. This time, he was prepared to tell me about his car's telematics. The dealer says the e-call module can fail, he said, almost eager, like he wanted to be useful to someone official. They say sometimes it thinks it's had an impact when it hasn't, and it calls. They did an update last year. My dash is fine. No red light. He told me his car had slept in his garage again. He sent me a photo of it sitting quietly under a layer of dust that had been there longer than I'd like to see on any car with a module that might call 112 inches the night. Telefónica's PSAP tech came to the quartel. It's rare to see the people who make your tech work in person. She brought a laptop and a way of tapping keys that makes engineers feel like musicians. She pulled logs. This is where it gets odd, she said, thoughtful, not dramatic. Your calls are entering our PSAP with the right tokens, but they're missing a few like they've been copied sloppily by something upstream. The location is fine, that's how we get the dot. But the call's identity, it's not coming from the mobile network. It looks like an echo. Old Exchange hardware can do this if another call passes near it, electronically speaking. But the other call would have to be similar. Another e-call? Luna asked. She shrugged, not evasive, just honest. Or a test. Or a memory. Exchanges don't remember, of course. She added quickly, embarrassed by the human word. But they can carry residual behaviors. She sipped the coffee we'd made her and grimaced in a friendly way at its violence. We got one last open line out there a week later. We went again because it would have felt wrong not to. We stood by the rail with our beacons off and the stars so close you could shave with them. The tick came once, then silence. In the silence, I had the weirdest, most ordinary thought that I had left my indicator on after a lane change and someone behind would eventually flash at me, and I would thank them and fix it and carry on. That was the class of feeling the sound put in me. Not fear, not pity. That simple, practical urge to turn something off that had been left on. We wrote our reports with all the names spelled correctly, and nobody made to feel foolish. Attended e-call 112 at PK99. Negative search. Nilo Halado. We attached the audio. We sent the file to the systems people, and to 112, and to DGT. Telefónica sent us a note a fortnight later. Field action performed at exchange near Campomanes. Legacy card retired. No further events expected. It was simple, precise, enough. The next month, Luna and I ran PK 99 inches daylight on a training loop for new drivers. The scrub was winter brown. The culvert waited to be useful. I stood by the rail and looked down where my light had gone before. The place looked smaller. Things often do in the day. We saw a couple taking pictures of the curve like it was a view, which it is if you've been driving long enough that turns have character. The man asked if we could take a photo of them with their old seat. Luna did it with his even smile. They thanked us in that way people do when they like being part of a quiet story. Even now, on nights when the dots roll in and most of them are broken down lorries and wrong-way drivers who are sober and just confused, if I'm posted in that zone and the clock slides past 3, I roll off the power a little as I come to PK 99. I keep an ear out not for anything horrifying, just for that small tick that tells you the machine is doing what it does, waiting for the human to notice. Sometimes I think I hear it. Sometimes it's just the memory of it. I don't need an ending with a bow. The systems people pulled a card at an exchange and the call stopped. That fits. At the same time, I keep the other part, the human part, in my pocket. That a signal came to us at night with no person attached, that we went up the mountain to see if there was someone in the dark who needed us, and that there is a bend in a road where, if you stand and listen, you might hear a machine asking for a yes that never comes. Our job is not to argue with the map. It is to go to the dot and call out, and listen as long as it takes to know we've done right by whoever might be inside the quiet. Story number 7. I'm a Maresialo with the Carabinieri, posted in a small station in the Apennines between Emilia-Romagna and Tuscany. Nights here are usually simple bar noise drifting out of a piazza, a fox running across the provincial road, a neighbor dispute that ends with coffee because there are only so many families, and everyone's cousin is someone else's brother-in-law. The air carries stone, wood smoke, and the kind of quiet that has its own gravity. The Centrale Operativa Nu 112 pushed the call to us at 2:17. The operator's voice was steady, the way people sound when the console lights up and their heart rate doesn't. Maresialo, we have an open line 112, presenting as a fixed extension inside the Palazzo Comunale di San Martino. Caller is silent. Call taker reports faint movement and an intermittent bell tone. Callback attempts not possible. The number displays as the internal switchboard extension 23. The commune's night watch requested your presence, she added, in that neutral tone that puts a detail on the table without telling you what to make of it. For awareness, the building is listed as closed after seismic works. Power is limited to emergency circuits. The Palazzo Comunale is a 19th century town hall that has the weight of older stones under it, a facade with 3 arches, a clock you can hear if you stand in the piazza at noon, and pretend time is something you can touch. After the last earthquakes, they closed it for reinforcement. Offices were moved to a prefab behind the church. Only the archivio, the archives in the back, kept their paper and their dust. The custode had the keys. He lives 2 doors down and knows every hinge by its noise. I nodded to my appuntato, Rossi, a man who doesn't mind the hour because he drinks espresso like air. We rolled across cobbles that always sound a little too loud when you have beacons on. The piazza was empty. The clock above the palazzo read 2:10, the kind of 5 minutes public clocks keep for themselves. The custode Signor Pavan was waiting under the portico with a scarf and a ring of keys that looked like the props in a period film. He gave me that small lift of the chin people here use instead of a greeting at night. I didn't want to call, but the switchboard red light was on, he said. I heard a call click and then nothing, and 112 told me the call came from inside. There is no one inside. Centrale, I said into my radio. Carabinieri San Martino on scene at the palazzo. Custode present. Any recent audio on the open line? Affirmative, the operator replied. Our call taker notes a bell tone like a small chime, repeating irregularly, no speech captured. The call has been live for 6 minutes. Pavan unlocked the main doors. Inside, the air had the clean, cold smell of stone that has decided to hold on to winter. The emergency lights threw a blue along the corridor. To the left, Sala Consiliare, the council chamber, long table under a dust cover like a sleeping boat. To the right, offices with their names still on frosted glass. Straight ahead, a stairway that curves with a wrought iron rail someone had polished a lifetime ago and hadn't since. Rossi angled toward the portinaria, the little porter's room with the switchboard desk. On the wall was the Centralino, an older private branch exchange the commune had kept, even after most lines went VoIP. Its power light was off. The handset hung properly on the cradle. The phone next to it, a simple desk unit with EXT23 labeled on a strip of tape, was unplugged from the wall. Someone had wrapped its cord neatly in a figure 8 and taped it. Pavan said, I did that when they closed. The technicians told me to leave the cabinets alone. There is still emergency power for the lights and the clock in the tower, but the phone is dead. I promise you. I listened, not to the phones, but to the kind of room tone that tells you whether tonight is going to be about a person or a system. The building gave back a measured quiet, the click of heat in a pipe that wasn't heating anything, the feather touch of air moving under a door. From the council chamber, faint, like something remembered rather than heard, came a ding. Not the clock. Smaller. The tone you get when an elevator door closes if the elevator were upstairs in a place without an elevator. Centrale, I said. We're hearing a small bell tone from the Sala Consiliare area. Please patch 10 seconds of current audio to our set. The operator acknowledged. A second later, my earpiece gave me the open line. A steady room, no human breath. Then the same small ding we had just heard with our ears. It wasn't an intercom. It wasn't a phone ring. It was the little device sound that says something has completed, like a microwave without the food, or a timer that had nothing to time. We cleared it methodically, as you do when you're looking for someone in a building you know too well. The Sala Conciliare's long table wore a plastic cover, tape yellowing at the corners. Chairs sat upside down on it like patient animals. The dais under the crest had the mayor's microphone laid gently on its side, its cable coiled. On the wall, a clock. Battery removed wise with old buildings. Time becomes a superstition. On the far side, a door to the anteroom with a kettle and a cupboard, where they keep nothing now. A notice pinned by the door. Lavori in corso aria interdetta. The padlock on the door beyond it had a fresh shine. Pavin said, "Seismic works. The upper offices are closed. The stairs to the archive are open. But you know as much as I do." Rossi checked the windows. They were latched. Dust had drawn a neat line at the sashes. I ran a beam along the skirting, where mice sometimes leave evidence. Nothing recent. In the Porton area, I looked at the Centralino again. The faceplate's plastic had turned the honey color old plastics do. The little labels under the buttons still said names: Segreteria, Anagrafe, Technico, and at the bottom, a handwritten campaign. Bells. The button would once have rung the bell for the porter when someone entered. I pressed it. Nothing. The building pretended not to notice. "Centrale," Rossi said, appreciating process. "Could you attempt to dial extension 23? We will hold in the reception and listen." "Attempting," the operator said. There was a pause I could measure with the same instinct the bell used. Then, faint. Not local to the room but within the building. A ring. Not the modern digital trill. A single, tidy ring. As if an older instrument were being polite. It came from the far end of the corridor near the staircase. We walked that way without hurrying. At the base of the stairs, there's a little alcove where a municipal telephone used to live for public use. A cream wall-mounted unit, with a shelf where people wrote down numbers on their palms. It had been removed with care months before. The screw holes were neatly plugged. On the wall, there was still the ghost rectangle where the paint had stayed brighter under the phone. "This is where we had the fixed line for visitors," Pavan said softly, almost apologizing to no one. Telco took it away. I saw them put the plate in a box. I put my ear near the wall because sometimes your body wants certainty your brain can't give it. I heard the building. A pipe far away tapping, as if a small animal with a polite hammer lived in it. Under that, a sound we've all decided only belongs to phones that caught breath before a ring, and then nothing. We went upstairs. The upper corridor was narrower, the light flatter. The Anagraph office records had high shelves you feel in the back of your eyes when you look at them in the dark. Folders wear their dates like memories. The Archivio door stood open with a tape across it at knee height. The archive room is cool even in August, lined with metal shelves and papers in boxes that prescription must call permanent. On the wall, next to the door where someone would have put a call list years ago, was a stubby red emergency handset without a dial, the kind that calls only one number when you lift it. Its cord ended in a capped conduit. A laminated card above it said, Emergenza Esterno, 17/118. It was the relic of a system that had been simplified by the national number. I lifted it out of reflex. Weight in the hand, no tone, no current. I returned it gently. "Centrale," I said. "We have no sign of entry. Phones present are disconnected. We did hear a ring at the base of the stairs when you attempted the callback. Can you confirm the presenting number in your logs?" "Affirmative," the operator said. "It shows as Palazzo Comunale, Centralino EXT23. Our tech notes, it should not be possible to present from that extension if the PBX is unpowered." We held our breath without trying. The bell tone came again, softer, like it had been carried into the room on the back of the air. 3 notes. Not musical in the way a song is, but honest. Ding, ding, ding. Rossi's eyes moved in that small way he has when he's adding columns in his head. Pavan rubbed his hands together. It was not cold enough to justify it. We checked the small elevator that had been installed in the 1,990 seconds as a kindness to old legs. I'd forgotten it existed until my head gave me the image of its buttons. The works had locked it out. The car sat at the top floor with a notice. Ascensor fuori servizio. The emergency phone plate inside the cabin had been blanked with a piece of plastic and 2 screws. When they did the seismic reinforcement, they killed its power, Pavan said, almost eager to be useful. I have the switch. He opened the machine room door to show us the breakers. All off. What happens next is what I wrote in my report without adjectives. The Central Operativa patched a 10-second clip from the open line to our sets. We heard, quite clearly, my voice, my words, from 5 minutes earlier in the reception. Carabinieri San Martino, on scene. The intonation was mine, the small drag on the R I give, without thinking when I speak on the radio. Under that, lifted like a low tide, a woman's voice. The engineer later wrote in his note, female, adult, words unclear. Standing in the archive doorway, I would have written, a simple, polite, mi sentite? Can you hear me? Not frightened, not urgent. Like someone testing if a microphone is alive. I felt the back of my neck do the thing it does when I'm 10 years old again, and my grandmother's radio picks up a station that has no business reaching us. Rossi, who is not easily moved by technical oddities, lowered his shoulders, then lifted them again like he was reminding his body of its own weight. Copy, I said, because that's the thing you say when you don't want to say anything else into a system that records you for posterity. We walked back down. The clock in the tower gave 2 more small ticks, then a smooth practice strike, a single bell for the half hour. As if in sympathy, somewhere in the building, too far to point at, came that modest ding again. It landed exactly the way a small appliance tells you it has finished, and wants you to know with the least possible fuss. We finished the sweep for people. Doors closed, windows latched, no paper disturbed in the archive in a way a draft would do if a window somewhere was ajar. We resecured with Pavan and signed his log. I asked him to call us if he saw the red light on the Centralino again. He said he would, and gave me that look people give when they are part of a story and don't want to be asked to add meaning to it. At the station, we asked the Central Operativa to forward the audio and the call log to our inbox for the WAND people here use instead of a greeting at night. I didn't want to call, but the switchboard red light was on, he said. I heard a call click and then nothing, and 112 told me the call came from inside. There is no one inside. Centrale, I said into my radio. Carabinieri San Martino on scene at the Palazzo. Custode present. Any recent audio on the open line? Affirmative, the operator replied. Our call taker notes a bell tone like a small chime, repeating irregularly, no speech captured. The call has been live for 6 minutes. Pavan unlocked the main doors. Inside, the air had the clean, cold smell of stone that has decided to hold on to winter. The emergency lights threw a blue along the corridor. To the left, Sala Consiliare, the council chamber, long table under a dust cover like a sleeping boat. To the right, offices with their names still on frosted glass. Straight ahead, a stairway that curves with a wrought iron rail someone had polished a lifetime ago and hadn't since. Rossi angled toward the portinaria, the little porter's room with the switchboard desk. On the wall was the Centralino, an older private branch exchange the commune had kept, even after most lines went VoIP. Its power light was off. The handset hung properly on the cradle. The phone next to it, a simple desk unit with EXT23 labeled on a strip of tape, was unplugged from the wall. Someone had wrapped its cord neatly in a figure 8 and taped it. Pavan said, I did that when they closed. The technicians told me to leave the cabinets alone. There is still emergency power for the lights and the clock in the tower, but the phone is dead. I promise you. I listened, not to the phones, but to the kind of room tone that tells you whether tonight is going to be about a person or a system. The building gave back a measured quiet, the click of heat in a pipe that wasn't heating anything, the feather touch of air moving under a door. From the council chamber, faint, like something remembered rather than heard, came a ding. Not the clock. Smaller. The tone you get when an elevator door closes, if the elevator were upstairs in a place without an elevator. Centrale, I said. We're hearing a small bell tone from the Sala Consiliare area. Please patch 10 seconds of current audio to our set. The operator acknowledged. A second later, my earpiece gave me the open line. A steady room, no human breath. Then the same small ding we had just heard with our ears. It wasn't an intercom. It wasn't a phone ring. It was the little device sound that says something has completed, like a microwave without the food, or a timer that had nothing to time. We cleared it methodically, as you do when you're looking for someone in a building you know too well. The Sala Conciliare's long table wore a plastic cover, tape yellowing at the corners. Chairs sat upside down on it like patient animals. The dais under the crest had the mayor's microphone laid gently on its side, its cable coiled. On the wall, a clock. Battery removed wise with old buildings. Time becomes a superstition. On the far side, a door to the anteroom with a kettle and a cupboard, where they keep nothing now. A notice pinned by the door. Lavori in corso aria interdetta. The padlock on the door beyond it had a fresh shine. Pavin said, "Seismic works. The upper offices are closed. The stairs to the archive are open. But you know as much as I do." Rossi checked the windows. They were latched. Dust had drawn a neat line at the sashes. I ran a beam along the skirting, where mice sometimes leave evidence. Nothing recent. In the Porton area, I looked at the Centralino again. The faceplate's plastic had turned the honey color old plastics do. The little labels under the buttons still said names: Segreteria, Anagrafe, Technico, and at the bottom, a handwritten campaign. Bells. The button would once have rung the bell for the porter when someone entered. I pressed it. Nothing. The building pretended not to notice. "Centrale," Rossi said, appreciating process. "Could you attempt to dial extension 23? We will hold in the reception and listen." "Attempting," the operator said. There was a pause I could measure with the same instinct the bell used. Then, faint. Not local to the room but within the building. A ring. Not the modern digital trill. A single, tidy ring. As if an older instrument were being polite. It came from the far end of the corridor near the staircase. We walked that way without hurrying. At the base of the stairs, there's a little alcove where a municipal telephone used to live for public use. A cream wall-mounted unit, with a shelf where people wrote down numbers on their palms. It had been removed with care months before. The screw holes were neatly plugged. On the wall, there was still the ghost rectangle where the paint had stayed brighter under the phone. "This is where we had the fixed line for visitors," Pavan said softly, almost apologizing to no one. Telco took it away. I saw them put the plate in a box. I put my ear near the wall because sometimes your body wants certainty your brain can't give it. I heard the building. A pipe far away tapping, as if a small animal with a polite hammer lived in it. Under that, a sound we've all decided only belongs to phones that caught breath before a ring, and then nothing. We went upstairs. The upper corridor was narrower, the light flatter. The Anagraph office records had high shelves you feel in the back of your eyes when you look at them in the dark. Folders wear their dates like memories. The Archivio door stood open with a tape across it at knee height. The archive room is cool even in August, lined with metal shelves and papers in boxes that prescription must call permanent. On the wall, next to the door where someone would have put a call list years ago, was a stubby red emergency handset without a dial, the kind that calls only one number when you lift it. Its cord ended in a capped conduit. A laminated card above it said, Emergenza Esterno, 17/118. It was the relic of a system that had been simplified by the national number. I lifted it out of reflex. Weight in the hand, no tone, no current. I returned it gently. "Centrale," I said. "We have no sign of entry. Phones present are disconnected. We did hear a ring at the base of the stairs when you attempted the callback. Can you confirm the presenting number in your logs?" "Affirmative," the operator said. "It shows as Palazzo Comunale, Centralino EXT23. Our tech notes, it should not be possible to present from that extension if the PBX is unpowered." We held our breath without trying. The bell tone came again, softer, like it had been carried into the room on the back of the air. 3 notes. Not musical in the way a song is, but honest. Ding, ding, ding. Rossi's eyes moved in that small way he has when he's adding columns in his head. Pavan rubbed his hands together. It was not cold enough to justify it. We checked the small elevator that had been installed in the 1,990 seconds as a kindness to old legs. I'd forgotten it existed until my head gave me the image of its buttons. The works had locked it out. The car sat at the top floor with a notice. Ascensor fuori servizio. The emergency phone plate inside the cabin had been blanked with a piece of plastic and 2 screws. When they did the seismic reinforcement, they killed its power, Pavan said, almost eager to be useful. I have the switch. He opened the machine room door to show us the breakers. All off. What happens next is what I wrote in my report without adjectives. The Central Operativa patched a 10-second clip from the open line to our sets. We heard, quite clearly, my voice, my words, from 5 minutes earlier in the reception. Carabinieri San Martino, on scene. The intonation was mine, the small drag on the R I give, without thinking when I speak on the radio. Under that, lifted like a low tide, a woman's voice. The engineer later wrote in his note, female, adult, words unclear. Standing in the archive doorway, I would have written, a simple, polite, mi sentite? Can you hear me? Not frightened, not urgent. Like someone testing if a microphone is alive. I felt the back of my neck do the thing it does when I'm 10 years old again, and my grandmother's radio picks up a station that has no business reaching us. Rossi, who is not easily moved by technical oddities, lowered his shoulders, then lifted them again like he was reminding his body of its own weight. Copy, I said, because that's the thing you say when you don't want to say anything else into a system that records you for posterity. We walked back down. The clock in the tower gave 2 more small ticks, then a smooth practice strike, a single bell for the half hour. As if in sympathy, somewhere in the building, too far to point at, came that modest ding again. It landed exactly the way a small appliance tells you it has finished, and wants you to know with the least possible fuss. We finished the suite for people. Doors closed, windows latched, no paper disturbed in the archive in a way a draft would do if a window somewhere was ajar. We resecured with Pavan and signed his log. I asked him to call us if he saw the red light on the Centralino again. He said he would, and gave me that look people give when they are part of a story and don't want to be asked to add meaning to it. At the station, we asked the Central Operativa to forward the audio and the call log to our inbox for the WAD. Us, please answer. My voice went into the stoop and lay down. The house kept the cool of a day that had given up quickly. At the back, through the kitchen window, I could see the corner where a phone used to live. Farmers put phones where they can put a cup of tea down next to them. There was a rectangle on the wall a little cleaner than the rest, a ghost where a Bakelite had once hung. The line ran from the DP into the house, the cable lifted and tied back with a cable tie by someone who had done a careful job. No handset, no plate, no wire loose enough to excuse noises. We walked the perimeter, Govinder holding his torch low the way he was taught so it doesn't blind you. The wind pump stood straight in its little circle. The rod in its pipe rose from a concrete pad. I put 2 fingers on the riser. Metal keeps a record of its night. It was cold, which sounds like nothing until you learn how often things tell you things with temperature. Control, I said. Any chance of Telcom's line tech to confirm if there's juice at the exchange? The operator said he'd try their on-call and, while he did, asked, do you want me to attempt a callback? It won't ring anything local if the line's dead, but sometimes we get audio on the open channel when we do. Go ahead, I said. It didn't ring in the yard. It did ring in the part of the air that belongs to a different place. On the open line we were patched to, we heard one neat, old-fashioned ring. Not the trill of a mobile, not the ring of a modern handset. The kind you get from a bell you can see in your head, a dome with a little hammer. It rang once. Then the metallic squeak returned. 2 short, 1 long. As if the pump were being asked to count. We have a rural safety WhatsApp for our CPF farmers. SAPS, community. I pinged the chair, an who can be counted on to find a key even if there isn't one. Anyone got keys for Cromdry? I asked. He sent back a typing bubble, which in this place feels like a kind of miracle, and then, yes. Under brick by back tank. Too many of us know it. Use it, Sergeant. The key was where he said. It turned with the tidy effort that goes with a door that still wants to work. The kitchen smelled of dust that had agreed to be clean. A table with a line where a jug had once been. The floor had grains of sand in corners because houses here always do. No sign of entry. In the passage, Pictures still hung on a nail because someone had thought it better to let them do that than to put them in a box where they could break. Police. I called again, softer. The way you use your inside voice for the dead of night in an old house, even if no one you know is using it. We cleared each room with the patience my first field training officer had given me by example. Bedroom empty. Curtains tied back. Cupboard holding the smell of wood. Lounge with a couch that had been the wrong color for too long. In the pantry, on a shelf that had once held bread, sat a black phone that should not have been there. Not the wall mount from the kitchen, but a desk set, dusty and heavy, with a rotary dial that still had numbers under glass. Its cord was cut flush where it would have fed into a socket. Someone had put it down and left it the way you leave a book on a shelf you don't think you'll read again. I picked up the receiver because sometimes you do the foolish thing to remind yourself of the borders between things. It was cold. No tone. When I set it back, the springs in the cradle gave that tiny, sweet sound of old metal doing the smallest job it knows how to do. Control, Govender said. Inside crumb dry. Found an old handset, disconnected. Line appears isolated. Any update from Telcom? Control came back. Yes. Telcom on. Call says the pair to that farm was lifted at the exchange last year. No card present. They say what we're hearing could be a presentation from a legacy relay upstream. They're en route to the cabinet by the siding to confirm. We moved back outside because sometimes the place sounds more like itself if you stop asking it questions. The wind pump gave its 2 short, 1 long. Somewhere beyond the fence, an owl changed trees. Govender leaned against a post and looked up. You start to know his face well enough you can tell when he's moved from looking to listening. Control patched another short clip before we asked. For your report, the operator said, polite, professional. We heard the ring again, and then, under the open space, a sound like fabric on a rough surface, a sleeve on wood. Not urgent, not afraid. Just living, or having lived. Telcom arrived 20 minutes later, a man in a white backie with a sticker that had been on the doors long enough to have a memory. His name was Walter. He had the slow walk of a person who knows cables don't care if you hurry. He opened the little gray DP on the wall and showed me the empty binding posts where the pair would have landed. Nothing here, he said. At the road there's a pair, but it's dark. At the exchange the card is gone. He radioed another tech at the cabinet near the siding and told him to pull a faceplate. We listened to 2 people who keep our version of the invisible world working speak to each other like doctors. Simple. Unflustered. Almost tender. With the way they talk about pieces no one else sees. Back at the stoop, Walter cocked his head. You hear that squeak? He asked, like the night belonged to both of us. Yeah, I said. Pump. He made a doubtful face. No wind, he said. Sometimes the packing rod drops a bit once it's cooled. You get that. He said it like a story to comfort us without trying to. He took out a small meter and clipped it on a test jack. Flat. He turned it so I could see. No volts, he said, cheerful, like he likes it when a thing proves him right. If you're getting a call, it's not coming from here. We did what you do when a piece refuses to fit. We gave it time, and then we wrote it honest. Attended Crom Dry for 10111 open line. Premises secure. No sign of entry. Old handset present. Disconnected. Telcom attended. No line voltage at DP. Unexplained periodic metallic squeak noted, coinciding with audio from control. No persons found. We closed the OB for the night and drove back a road that gives you the feeling the backy is the only moving thing in the world. 2 nights later at 2-9. Control called again. Same line. Same crumb dry. Same audio. We went. You don't not go because you don't know what to expect. The yard had the same shape. Someone, Walter or his colleague, had cable tied the DP cabinet shut with a new tie and left the tail clipped neat. The kitchen smelled of the same decision to stay unused. The squeak came again in the same rhythm. I stood with a hand on the pump riser and felt a faint vibration travel under my palm that didn't match the sound. It was like putting your hand on the bonnet of a car that isn't running and feeling the road through it anyway. Control, I said. Patch audio live for a minute. They did. We stood and listened to our place through another place's ear. The squeak we heard with our own ears and the squeak on the line were not exactly the same. The line's squeak lagged half a beat, then caught up, then led, like two clocks that refused to be friends. Govender gave me the smallest shrug. It says, "You hearing this?" I nodded. It says, "Ja." We called the CPF chair. He said he was awake anyway and came up in his own baccy. Lights off so he didn't kick the whole farm awake. He stood by the fence with us and took off his cap without saying why. "You remember when Mr. Smith had that party line? When you dialed with the crank and you had to listen if it was your ring?" He asked no one in particular. 2 longs and a short for the foreman's house. He smiled a little, remembering a thing he didn't think he remembered. The squeak went 2 long, 1 short, as if it had been waiting for a prompt. He did not smile again. We didn't kick the door that night. We didn't need to. We didn't call in the world. We wrote another entry and went back to patrol a town that sometimes feels like a living room when everybody you know is asleep in it. The 3rd time, the same. The 4th time, Control patched a longer clip, and I heard something I can only describe like this. The tiny lever sound a rotary dial makes as it returns. Not quickly, not slowly, because someone has taken their finger out after dialing one. I learned to make 10111 on a Bakelite phone in my grandmother's place. 10111. It is a little rhythm a hand never forgets. We asked Control to tag the incident for a systems note. Telcom moved faster than I expected, which is not a joke about Telcom, just an old reflex. They pulled a legacy line card at the exchange in town and told me later, in an email that read like a man thinking out loud, that it had been presenting phantom off-hook when a certain relay on the microwave link hiccuped during load shedding. 10111 is a free call on fixed lines, he wrote. You can seize a line without credit and without presentation if the earth returns the right way. It's not supposed to happen on a lifted pair, but old things do their own thing, he added, because he is a person and not a system. I grew up near there. My Uma had the same crank phone. He did not add what that meant to him, and he didn't need to. We had 2 more nights of calls. On one of them, Control patched audio at a moment when Govender coughed, and heard his cough in the open line somewhere else, a heartbeat later. It wasn't a perfect match. The world is too big to line up like that. On the other, the clip held the faint clack of something like a cup on a saucer again, the modest sound of someone not in a hurry. The calls stopped when the card came out at the exchange. Walter sent me a photo of the old line shelf on his phone, metal with holes and a neat set of stickers. One sticker was half peeled and had Crumdry 03 on it in faded pen. He captioned it with a thumb up and a sordid Sarge. The pump at the farm still squeaked now and then. Machines keep doing what they have always done. I stood at the gate one quiet night after that, off duty, just because sometimes you go back to the place where a thing asked to be noticed and you let it know you heard it. The sky was a story it was telling to itself. The pump didn't make a sound. Then it did, 2 short, 1 long, as if it was saying its name. Far away, a train at the old siding did the small blast a diesel gives when it wants to be noticed without scaring anything. It was a nice sound. I stood there and asked the air, "Can you hear me?" And the air answered the way it always does in the Northern Cape, with a kind of kindness so big it feels like nothing at all. What went into my report is the part that belongs to work. Times, names, case number. 10111, 1 open line, from decommissioned Telcom fixed service at Crumdry Farm. Multiple presentations between 2 and 3 on dates listed. No persons found, no signs of entry. Environmental sounds recorded. Wind, metallic squeak, at intervals. Audio of officer speech, not contemporaneous with clip time in one instance. Possible delay divided by patch artifact. Telcom attended. Legacy line card retired. Issue ceased. The rest belongs to the road at night. And the way systems and places keep small ghosts of what they were built to do. We aren't in the business of deciding what a thing means. We go, we stand at the gate, we call out, we listen, we make sure there isn't a person needing us in the dark. Then we sign the OB, hand over to the day shift, and drink bad coffee that tastes better than it should. If a pump says its little piece into the quiet, we let it. If a line says, "Still here," we answer, "We were too."